y'all, Cat Stan here again. We're gonna take the wheels off today.
This video started out way too long, so we're gonna try to speed things up with a voiceover covering the important bits. Don't worry, I'm not voicing over everything, so we'll still get to hang out. Removing your wheels is a good skill to know, whether you're trying to save some cash or end up stranded with a flat. I'm in that first category, removing my wheels to get some new Michelin Road 5s installed at Right Now, my local power sports store. And no, I am not sponsored. While I could save even more bucks by also changing the tires, I will gladly pay for the convenience of a tire changing machine someone else has already paid for. Since I'm using my stock center stand to raise the rear, I have to do the rear first before raising the front, otherwise the rear would touch the ground and I wouldn't be able to get it off. This wouldn't be a problem if I was using my swing arm stand, but I'm too lazy to adjust the feet on it as it's currently set up for the truck bike. This is why I keep my stock center stand handy, even though I don't ride with it installed. So let's go over how to get the bike up on the center stand.
That's my little pick. Normal stands would actually have a spring to hold it up, but I'm not actually riding with this thing on, I'm literally just using it for maintenance, so I don't feel like messing with that spring. It's been a long time since I've done this, so let's see if I can. So what you want to do when you put it on the center stand, you get the bike upright as level as you can, and then just kind of support the foot until you can feel it on both feet. So that's right there. So like the bike's just on the little feet of the center stand. And I've got a hole right here that's part of the frame. And I'm literally gonna lift this up as I pull back, and I'm gonna put all of my weight down on this little foot here. Let's see if I'm strong enough to do it. Yay! It has been a while, so I get to move the camera again.
To remove the rear wheel, we need to make it accessible. So that means getting the rear up, which we just did. Remove the rear brake calipers and exhaust. If it's like mine, the exhaust is in the way of my rear caliper bolts, so it's got to come off. Then we'll remove the axle, spacers, and caliper brackets. Take note of where those spacers are coming from. Some bikes only have one on a particular side, and you really don't want to get that wrong when reassembling. Then we'll remove the chain, and then the wheel is free. And lastly, we'll check our bearings. So I'll be removing the exhaust first with two 12mm and some pliers. The springs holding the two brothers racing pipe on are old and come off with my hands, so I'll definitely have to replace those. As I remove parts from the bike, I like to keep the fasteners with the part that was removed, and if that's not an option, I'll set them in a magnetic bowl. Next, I'll be removing the brake caliper with a 13 and a 14mm. I have a Rogue 13 because I broke the other 14 a while ago, and a 13 was the replacement I could find at the time. Whenever you pull your brake calipers off the wheel with it still attached to the lines, it's best to mount the caliper with zip ties to keep tension off the brake line. It will also keep the caliper out of your workspace. I'll be leaving the brake pad clip on the bracket. Okay, so next up is the axle, which requires a 22 and 27mm sockets. Make sure that the bike is in neutral, otherwise getting the tire off may be a pain once you have the axle out. Notice that I don't have to hold the bolt side to break the nut side. This is likely due to the nut being a little too loose and the axle being all gummed up. With the nut off, we'll just tap the axle out with a hammer or a mallet. Note that I'm leaving the chain adjusters fixed for now, but I may end up adjusting them later during reassembly.
It's probably going to be difficult to see, but what I like to do is straddle the wheel with my legs. That way I can align it. Oh, that's filthy. Oh, and pull the axle right out. And then it makes it much easier too for putting things back on. So I'm going to roll the tire forward and see if I can just pull the chain off. Yep, chain's off. So here's a spacer. I got another one on the other side that does look different. Oh, this really needs to be cleaned. It's filthy. And bracket. So my right side is spacer, bracket, and that's pretty much it. And then the other side is just a spacer. So easy peasy. There we go.
This next part is completely optional. Since I'm taking these wheels to a shop to do the tire replacement for me, I like to remove the sprocket and vibration dampeners as well. In general, I prefer to keep the number of parts I give to a shop to a minimum. I'll definitely be the first to admit that I've lost a customer spacer before. Lastly, I check the bearings. My rear wheel has two bearings with a metal spacer in the middle. The first side I checked was rubbing on the spacer, so it was difficult to judge how free it was. I really take my time with this. Overall, I wasn't very happy with either bearing, so I went ahead and ordered a wheel bearing replacement kit that I will install during my next tire swap, or have someone else install for me. Regardless, some cleaning and lube should help until then, but I'll double check all that during reassembly.
Now for the front. Hands are filthy. This front stand kind of sucks for this bike because I've got like 2 millimeters of clearance on either side, so I almost always scratch and scrape my my rotors, but I mean, it is what it is. That's that. I remember being terrified the first time I did my front. So you saw that I positioned these guys right back here because that's where the weight's going to be distributed, and it's the same on both sides. So I get that lined up, make sure my wheel is straight, and just press down slowly and in control. Someone's got me excited, sorry. Okay.
Removing the front is very similar to the rear. So again, we're going to make it accessible. We got the front up already. Then we'll remove the brake calipers again, and for the front there are some axle pinch bolts. We'll definitely have to loosen those. Next we'll remove the axle spacers and caliper brackets, and again take note where those spacers are coming from. Once all that's out, then you can remove the wheel and check your bearings. Second burst, same as the first. Front calipers on my bike are secured with two 12mm bolts each, and I do have a dual caliper setup in the front, so I will have to take both of them off. In the front, I actually secure my brake caliper by my turn signal, which probably isn't the best idea, but it worked out pretty well. Didn't bend the turn signal too much because of course it's plastic. But it kept the calipers nicely out of the way. It also relieves tension on the lines. So remember how I said earlier you had to loosen up the pinch bolts? Well, it's been a while since I've taken my front wheel off, admittedly, so I honestly completely forgot about them, and the facial expressions that I make in discovering this are pretty hilarious. I'll point them out to you in a bit. So right now I'm pointing out that the front axle is a little bit different than the rear axle in that there's a bolt on the right side that threads directly into the axle versus a standard nut bolt setup. I'm going to try tapping out the axle, which I'll show you how to do in a second, and you'll see that I struggle with it. Reaction 1, reaction 2.
Oh. Duh! See, it's been a while. There's these two little dudes right here that are pinching the bottom of the fork around the axle, so I gotta I gotta loosen those up first. And they're also 12s. Thank you, Honda. You can see where the bolt came out. And I'm gonna use this 12, set it in there to tap out the axle.
Now that you know what I'm trying to do, how I'm doing it, and I have the pinch bolts loose, I'm gonna tap the axle out. As you can see, the axle is hitting the fork stand, so I gotta kind of wedge it and prop it out of the way with my pliers to actually get it out all of the way. I also realized that the long 12 that I used to start tapping it out was too wide at the end and I needed more length, so I ended up using a long 1/2 inch. We'll see how that pans out.
Uh-oh. Oh, my socket's stuck in there. Oh, I fucked up. You know what? Hopefully my socket will just fall out. There it goes. Oh, that's a spacer. So right now I'm getting stuck on the stand. The thing I was telling her, I had like all of, where's the other sides? All of 2 millimeters of clearance on either side. Come on, socket. And there's my socket. Came right out. That's it. I'm gonna do the same thing like they did on the rear, just go ahead and inspect my bearings. That one feels great. That one also feels great. Sweet. Oh, hit my head. Look at that handsome boy. Hey, Faye, you wanna come say hello? Come here. Hi. Alright, that's all. Check back in later. I don't know. Maybe I'll include cleaning, or maybe not. We'll see. Well, till next time. Hey, look at me. Good girl. That's a good picture. Okay, bye.